This photo of two friends seemed innocent until historians noticed a dark secret. Dr. Natalie Chen adjusted the settings on her digital scanner, preparing to process daguerreotypes from the Montgomery collection. As senior curator, she had handled thousands of images, but the next photograph in the queue made her pause. The 1853 image showed two teenage girls seated side by side on an ornate bench on a plantation veranda. On the left, a white girl of about 14, blonde hair and ringlets, wearing a formal Victorian-style dress with intricate lace. To her right sat a black girl of 15, also in a fine dress, elegant for an enslaved person, if that was her status. What an unusual composition for that era, Natalie murmured, noting the seemingly casual proximity of the two girls. Most period photographs showed clear power relationships, masters and servants, never equals sharing the same bench. She carefully positioned the delicate image in the high-resolution scanner. The Montgomery collection was celebrated for its depictions of antebellum Southern life. This photo featured as rare interracial friendship. As the enhanced digital image appeared on her monitor, Natalie zoomed in to check the quality. She examined different sections of the photograph, making notes about preservation concerns. When she reached the lower portion of the image, something caught her eye, a metallic object beneath the dress. Wait a minute. She adjusted the contrast and sharpness, bringing the detail into focus. What appeared to be an anklet revealed itself as a disturbing ornate metal shackle, disguised as jewelry. Natalie felt a chill run through her body. The heartwarming image was transformed into something sinister. It was documentation of captivity disguised as companionship. Dr. Whitaker needs to see this, she said, her voice barely audible in the empty lab. That evening, reviewing her notes, Natalie couldn't shake the expression she now recognized in the black girl's eyes. What had seemed like proper Victorian stoicism now appeared as resigned suffering hidden in plain sight. The museum's archives were housed in a temperature-controlled basement facility, a labyrinth of history. Natalie spent the morning searching for documentation related to the Montgomery plantation photograph. Here, she whispered, extracting a yellowed folder containing the original acquisition notes from 1972. The accompanying letter described it as Carolyn Montgomery with her companion Harriet, 1853. Dr. James Whitaker, the museum's director of historical research, leaned over her shoulder, his interest piqued. Companion. That's certainly a sanitized description. Look at this. Natalie pointed to a handwritten note attached to the original listing. The family claimed Harriet was a favored house servant. A common self-justifying narrative, James remarked. So have you found anything about the ankle restraint? Nothing. It's not mentioned in any of the documentation. I don't think previous researchers even noticed it. They continued through financial records and plantation inventories. Among sterile listings of human beings, they found an entry from 1851. Purchased girl. Age 13, $800. Intended companion for Miss Caroline. Intended companion, James repeated slowly. That's quite specific. In Elizabeth Montgomery's diary, they found a reference. Acquired a suitable companion for Carolyn today. The girl is well-mannered and speaks well. Carolyn is delighted with her new friend. Thomas has crafted a special arrangement that is both secure and befitting her position. Natalie felt her stomach turn at the casual cruelty of the passage. The special arrangement there describing the decorative shackle as if it were a privilege. Further entries revealed more about this arrangement. Caroline and Harriet spent the afternoon reading together. Harriet's education is proving useful, though we must be careful not to let her forget her place. The gold filigree was a good choice, elegant enough for her to be seen with Carolyn in public. This is worse than I thought, Natalie said quietly. She wasn't just enslaved. She was forced to perform friendship while being literally chained. A pet slave for a lonely plantation daughter, James nodded grimly. We need to look for other examples. If this was happening on the Montgomery plantation, it was likely occurring elsewhere. The National Archives in Washington, D.C., housed thousands of narratives from formerly enslaved people collected during the Federal Writers' Project of the 1930s. Natalie had arranged for research access, hoping to find any mention of Harriet or similar companion arrangements on other plantations. After days of searching through digitized records, she found something remarkable. An interview with an elderly woman named Harriet Johnson, recorded in 1937 in Chicago. The birth year and Louisiana origins matched the girl in the photograph. Listen to this, Natalie said to James, who had joined her research expedition. I was purchased special to be a friend to the daughter, Miss Caroline. They dressed me fine, taught me to read some, though it was against the law. But don't let that fool you about kindness. I wore gold chain on my ankle for 4 years, only removed when I was safely locked in my room at night. James leaned forward, excitement building. That has to be her. The narrative continued. They called it my special bracelet. Said it was a privilege to wear gold when other slaves wore iron. But a chain is a chain, no matter how pretty. Miss Carolyn, she liked to pretend we were true friends. Maybe she even believed it. But friends don't own friends. Harriet described how she was required to speak properly, dress elegantly, and accompany Carolyn everywhere, from meals to social events to lessons. She was displayed as evidence of the Montgomery family's enlightened treatment of their enslaved people. while the decorative shackle ensured she couldn't escape. The photographer came for Miss Caroline's 14th birthday. The narrative continued. They dressed me in one of my finest dresses, still plain next to hers, and posed us together. Miss Caroline was so proud of that picture, said it showed how special our friendship was. Never saw that the chain on my ankle told the... This is a true story. It details Harriet's escape during the chaos of the Civil War. She fled north, where she married, raised children, and built a new life. Decades later, she shared her powerful story with a Federal Writers Project interviewer. She survived to tell her story, Natalie said softly, feeling a deep connection across time. And now we can make sure it's heard, she affirmed, determined to bring this history to light. Harriet's narrative struck Natalie powerfully. People today might look at the picture and see two girls being friends, not knowing one was property to the other. That's how slavery worked. Sometimes it dressed itself up pretty, but underneath was always chains. The discovery of Harriet's narrative energized Natalie's research. If one companion arrangement existed, others likely did. She assembled a small research team, including Dr. Marcus Johnson, an expert on enslavement practices, and Emily Parker, a digital imaging specialist, joined the critical investigation. We need to re-examine every supposedly friendly photograph of enslaved and free people together, Natalie explained. They focused on the lower portions of images, which might have been cropped in published versions. They developed an algorithm to scan the museum's digital archives for similar visual patterns. Formal portraits showing black and white individuals in close proximity, particularly children and young women, were targeted. We've identified 43 potential matches, Emily reported 2 weeks later, presenting a tablet. In 7 of them, we can clearly identify disguised restraints, decorative shackles, chains masked as jewelry, even what appears to be a gold ribbon tied around an ankle. But it's actually a thin metal band, Emily concluded, revealing the hidden truth. Marcus nodded grimly as he examined the compelling evidence. This fits with my research on what plantation owners called companionate enslavement, an insidious practice where enslaved children were forced to serve as emotional companions to white children. The psychological cruelty is staggering, Natalie observed, her voice filled with emotion, forcing someone to perform friendship while keeping them in bondage. Their findings extended beyond photography. Marcus uncovered plantation records from Georgia, Virginia, and the Carolinas. These included references to companion acquisitions and appropriate restraint practices for house companions. A diary from a Virginia plantation mistress was particularly revealing. Purchased a bright young girl for Mary's companion. Had the silversmith craft an attractive chain that won't embarrass us. The Blackmores were quite impressed with our arrangement and are seeking a companion for their own daughter. It was a status symbol, Marcus explained. Having an elegantly dressed, well-spoken enslaved companion for your daughter demonstrated both wealth and supposed benevolence, all while maintaining absolute control. These arrangements were common for plantation daughters isolated on rural estates with few social opportunities. The enslaved companions filled this void, but always with the underlying reality of ownership maintained through visible yet disguised restraints. These weren't exceptions or anomalies, Natalie concluded as they compiled their research. This was a recognized practice, hiding in plain sight in our historical records and photographs. The conference room fell silent as Natalie finished presenting her team's findings to the museum's exhibition committee. The projected image of Harriet and Carolyn remained on the screen, with the enhanced section clearly visible.
This completely changes how we should display and interpret this photograph, and potentially dozens of others in our collection.
This is powerful research, but we need to consider the implications carefully. The Montgomery collection was donated with considerable funding. The Montgomery family descendants sit on our board. We must proceed with caution.
All the more reason to be truthful about what these images actually show. This isn't just about one photograph. It's about correcting a fundamental misrepresentation of history. I agree with Natalie. We have a responsibility to present these images accurately, especially with Harriet's own testimony. Anything less would perpetuate the erasure of her experience.
What would you propose specifically?
A special exhibition, hidden in plain sight, centered on the Montgomery photograph and others we've identified. We present original interpretations alongside what we now understand, disguised restraints, forced companionship, and most importantly, Harriet's own words describing her experience. We could include interactive elements where visitors discover the hidden details themselves, just as Natalie did. It would be powerful experiential learning about how history can be obscured. And we include modern parallels, how exploitation can hide behind benevolent facades. We need to look more carefully at historical narratives that seem too comfortable.
The Montgomery family representatives will need to be informed before we proceed, of course, but they should be presented with our findings as historical fact, not as a point of negotiation. The evidence is clear. We owe her this truth. This is preposterous. You're defaming my ancestors based on a shadow in an old photograph. It's not a shadow, Ms. Montgomery Williams. It's clearly a decorative restraint, and we have Harriet's own testimony describing it. Oh, some interview with an old woman who claimed to be this Harriet person. How can you possibly verify that? The details match precisely: the dates, names, location, even the specific description of the gold filigree restraint. Additionally, we found your great-great-grandmother's diary entries describing the arrangement. We understand this is difficult information to process. The museum isn't attempting to single out your family. We've discovered similar practices were relatively common. My ancestors were respected members of Louisiana society, Eleanor insisted. They treated their people well for the times. With respect, Marcus interjected. Forcing a young girl to pretend friendship while keeping her shackled isn't treating someone well by any era's standards. The Montgomery family's attorney cleared his throat. The donation agreement gives the family certain rights regarding how these materials are displayed. We could pursue an injunction. You could, Richard acknowledged. But that would merely delay the inevitable. Dr. Chen's research is academically sound and will be published regardless. The question is whether your family wishes to be part of an honest historical reckoning, or prefers to be seen as attempting to suppress the truth. A younger Montgomery relative spoke up. Grandmother, perhaps we should consider a different approach. Times have changed since the collection was first donated. After tense negotiations, a compromise emerged. The Montgomery family wouldn't block the exhibition, but would be allowed to include a statement, acknowledging that while their ancestors participated in a morally unacceptable system, they were also products of their time and place. As they left the meeting, Eleanor stopped Natalie. You think you're doing something noble, but you're just stirring up painful history better left buried. Natalie met her gaze steadily. Harriet couldn't tell her story while she was chained, but she lived to make sure it was recorded. Don't you think she deserves to be heard now? With the Montgomery family negotiations behind them, Natalie's team focused on expanding their research. The museum had approved the exhibition, scheduled to open in 6 months. Now they needed to build a comprehensive understanding of the companion slave practice. Look at this, Emily called from her workstation. She had been analyzing a collection of letters between plantation families. There's an entire correspondence between the Montgomerys and the Whitfield family in Georgia about the companionship arrangement. They were essentially sharing tips. The letters revealed a network of elite families who had adopted similar practices. Elizabeth Montgomery had apparently pioneered the decorative restraint concept. Some even include design specifications to ensure they couldn't be removed without a key. The team discovered that these arrangements were most common among wealthy families with daughters between 10 and 16 years old. The enslaved companions were typically slightly older than the white children they served, selected for intelligence and appearance, and often given privileges like fine clothing and basic literacy, always with the underlying control maintained through physical restraints and psychological manipulation. It's a particularly gendered form of enslavement, observed Dr. Washington as she reviewed their findings. These girls were expected to provide not just service but emotional labor to appear genuinely attached to their In auction records, they found evidence that enslaved children advertised as suitable companions commanded higher prices. Some listings specifically mentioned well-mannered, refined features, or pleasing temperament, euphemisms for children who could convincingly perform. Most disturbingly, they found photographs of plantation daughters with their companions featured in family albums, presented as evidence of benevolent treatment. In many cases, the restraints were carefully positioned to remain just out of frame or disguised as decorative elements. They weren't hiding these arrangements, Natalie realized. They were proud of them. They saw them as enlightened, the ultimate display of power, Marcus added. Not just owning someone's body, but claiming ownership of their emotions and relationships too, forcing them to simulate friendship while ensuring they could never forget they were property. This understanding added layers of complexity to their exhibition planning. It wasn't just about exposing hidden restraints in photographs, but about revealing an entire system of emotional exploitation that had been obscured by sanitized historical narratives. The The research team expanded their search, reaching out to other institutions and private archives across the country. Their inquiries generated both interest and resistance, as curators grappled with the implications for their historical photographs. The Historical Society of Louisiana has identified 3 more images with similar characteristics, reported Emily, and they found an estate inventory that specifically lists companion restraints among the valuables. As word of their project spread through academic circles, Natalie began receiving emails from researchers who had noticed similar anomalies. A pattern was emerging across the South, concentrated among the wealthiest plantation families. Dr. Washington had been conducting oral history research, reviewing interviews with formerly enslaved people for mentions of companion arrangements. I found 11 accounts that describe similar situations, though not all mention the decorative restraints specifically. Some talk about being locked in at night or about wearing specific tokens that mark them as belonging to the daughter of the house. The most powerful breakthrough came when they located a descendant of another companion, a woman named Gloria Thompson, whose great-great-grandmother, Rachel, had been forced into a similar arrangement with the daughter of a Virginia tobacco planter. My grandmother passed down Rachel's story, Gloria explained during their recorded interview, how she had to dress up and play with little Miss Charlotte every day, but wasn't allowed to speak to the other enslaved children, because she might pick up their common ways. She slept on a pallet in Miss Charlotte's room, chained to the bed frame every night. Gloria had preserved a small object, a decorative gold cuff, with an internal locking mechanism, passed down through generations. Rachel kept this after she escaped during the war, said she never wanted her children to forget what pretty things could hide. The cuff was nearly identical to the one visible in the Montgomery photograph, confirming that these were manufactured items, not one-off creations. As their research database grew, they identified over 60 clear examples of the practice, spanning from the 1830s to the Civil War, concentrated among elite families in Virginia, Georgia, and Louisiana. The physical evidence, combined with written and oral testimonies, painted a comprehensive picture of a widespread yet previously unrecognized aspect of slavery's psychological control. Each of these photographs tells the same story, Natalie observed as she reviewed their collection. A story of friendship that wasn't friendship at all, of chains disguised as jewelry, of childhood